steps. I think it's 15 steps needed to do this successfully. First thing is making sure all your equipment out and ready, right? That's one of them. The other one is making sure you temper your chocolate properly because they won't release from the mold, okay? We talked a little bit about molded chocolates last week. First step is to make sure your mold is clean and dry. Next is to buff it with your cotton ball, right? So it cleans out any leftover cocoa butter or impurities in the mold. Shine, gives it a little bit of static inside, which helps the chocolate to contract, so you get a good shine. For the practical, you're all doing semi-sweet. You don't have to do cocoa butter colors. I want you to do it plain right now. Keep it very simple to practice, and then afterwards you can add cocoa butter colors inside, just like we did with the chocolate bar, okay? Same idea. Chocolate is tempered, so you're gonna do is first temper your chocolate, okay? Your mold is clean already. You temper 2 pounds of chocolate is enough for one person, more than enough to do really 2 molds, okay? You can focus on one to start. Now, the consistency of the chocolate, I made sure I was tempered, okay? I set. I want to make sure that this is fluid enough that when I fill the mold, we talked a little bit, the smaller the mold, the quicker it sets inside the mold. So you did those big chocolate bars last week where it didn't really matter if it was fluid enough. But for this, if the chocolate is on the thick side, close to 85, and you start to ladle it in your mold, it's gonna set up right away. And by the time you get to the last one and you try to dump it out, you want a hollow cavity, it's gonna be filled, okay, it'll be solid. So the idea behind this chocolate is just to give a coating, a shell on the inside. So you need to make sure your chocolate's fluid enough for that. So, I 1, 2, 3 it over the heat. It's almost there. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. I have my towel so I don't get water on my mold. Stir, stir, stir. Make sure that it's nice and emulsified. No fat on the surface. I have my draining board. I'm going to show you what that's for. I'm going to pick up my mold. Something's in there. This one you can kind of hold on the back of it with your fingertips. See, I got my thermometer out there. Once you know it's in temper, if you 1, 2, 3, get your thermometer out of the way. Pick up your chocolate. Try to not go too slow while doing this, because otherwise it'll set up. But you also are trying not to make a big mess and pour chocolate all over. You want to utilize just enough to fill your molds up to the top. Alright? So all the way up to the top. Then you're going to, if you follow along, you're going to tap. That'll settle the chocolate into all those grooves. If you're missing some chocolate in a mold, usually there's enough. You can kind of spread it out a little bit. Corners, tap, 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 tap. I do 1 scrape just to clean it off. Get rid of the excess, the sides as well. Again, tap, tap, tap. Now, how long do you let it sit in the mold? It says set partially. That all depends on the chocolate. Milk and white you need to leave in the mold longer because they're on the thinner side. Semi-sweet, you have to dump out pretty quickly, okay? So I'm tapping, you see all the air bubbles coming to the surface? Really give it a good smack. Once it's settled in there, you're gonna flip it. You need to make sure that your bowl is big enough, that you flip this out over the bowl. Then you tap again. So really the time it takes to fill the mold, scrape it and tap it, it's set partially enough. Because the goal is, you can see from here, to have an even shell. Now I'm wiping off the excess. And you see when I wipe, some of the chocolate goes inside, so that's where this comes in handy. You flip onto your rack, okay? That's gonna drain the excess. If you flipped it over right side up now and left that chocolate in there, you're gonna have really heavy, thick tops because the chocolate's just gonna settle down in there. So you flip it over. Now, what you have to be careful of when you flip it over is that you don't leave it to set on the rack. So you see it says flip onto rack, chill, move on rack. When fudgy, scrape again. Those are all your little hints. Because if you let it sit on the rack and crystallize completely, right? Crystallize meaning set and harden completely, it'll be stuck to the rack and it won't be smooth. So I'm just taking out my ladle so I get it out of the way. And this chocolate, I'm gonna have to keep tempered for the caps. So that's the other hard part about this. You temper once, and then I'm gonna make my ganache next. but every once in a while, I gotta make sure that this stays fluid. All right, it doesn't set up in my bowl. Then I gotta bounce back here. I lift this guy up. See, it's starting to get a little bit fudgy. I can scrape. Don't do this. See how I have a lot of chocolate on my spatula? If I were to just keep scraping, I'm gonna mess that up. So I wanna clean my spatula off. So I have a nice clean edge. And I'm gonna scrape again, right up against the plastic. And flip it. All right, so the goal for this is to have a hollow shell. Not a thick line. So the next thing I'm gonna do while that crystallizes, and I'm gonna make my ganache. At the same time, I have my water here. I can put it aside. And every once in a while, I can 1, 2, 3 it to keep it from setting up in my bowl, because I need to be fluid, right, when I go to use it. So the next step is the ganache. So in this lesson today, there is one ganache recipe. It's a very simple, straightforward one. The only flavoring is either alcohol, or you can put vanilla extract in it. It's using semi-sweetened milk chocolate, a small amount of milk, which makes it a little bit soft. So what I did was I put the heavy cream and milk and corn syrup in the pot. I'm going to bring it to a boil. The chocolate is the same kind of thing we talked about last week, where it needs to be either chopped or slightly melted. I said I prefer doing it chopped so that the temperature wasn't too hot. So this is 2 pieces that fell in here that weren't chopped. We'll hope for the best. I'm going to bring that to a boil. The other thing we want to make sure is the butter is soft, right? When we add the butter into the ganache. What temperature did we want the ganache to be before we added the butter? Anybody remember? 90, 95. You don't want to wait for it to get too cold, otherwise, sorry, you should.
It's not gonna melt.
Huh?
It's not gonna melt.
Yes, it's not gonna melt if it's too cold. Thank you. But if you add it when it's 110 or really high, it's just gonna melt the butter completely, and your ganache is gonna be on the loose side. So be careful of that. All right. Usually, if you boil your water, you can work with just one induction, going back and forth. So I brought my heavy cream to a boil. I'm going to pour it right over my chocolate. And I'm going to let it have a minute with the heavy cream to kind of melt, right? I'm going to pop this back on, get my water hot. Keeping an eye on my chocolate. Ganache, chocolate, mold. Keep an eye on the mold.